and and various other initiatives, interventions in our kind of global technology space to introduce the particularities of African languages. So we're going to hear our talk from Kola shortly, and then a conversation with Professor Smaranda Muresan. And Professor Muresan is an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science at Barnard College. She's also an affiliate of the Computer Science Department at Columbia. Her profile is very music to my ears. Her research focuses on human-centric natural language processing for social good and responsible computing. And she's developed computational models for understanding and generating language in context with applications to computational social science, education, to public health, and other human-friendly fields. So I'm looking forward to your talk and then to your conversation together, and then we'll open up the room for Q&A from everyone. Please join me in welcoming Kola Tubosun.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for the warm introduction and for the cheesecake. Professor Muresan. And thank you for the hospitality so far at Columbia. I am very happy to be here. It's my first time here. Well, yesterday was. And I'm very excited for the opportunity to speak about the work I've done and the challenges we face in the space of African language in technology. We have gone through some of these issues over the last 2 hours, and you would find some of them in the talk that I wrote. And there will be probably other new things to talk about much later. I wrote this talk as kind of a dedication to two of my professors that got me involved in language work. One of them was Professor Ronald Schaefer of Southern Illinois University. He's retired now. And Professor Francis Egbuhari of the University of Ibadan. I'll get back to talking about them in a minute. So Professor Egbuhari, Professor Schaefer is, that's him. He was born in 1949. I first met him in Nigeria in 2002 when he came with a couple of friends and colleagues from the Southern Illinois University to work on a cross-university project with the University of Ibadan. But that was not his first time in Nigeria. It was just the first time I was meeting him. He had worked with another professor of mine who was then the head of the Department of Linguistics, Professor Francis Egbuhari, that's him. And together they had done a lot of work on a language called Emai. Emai is spoken in southern Nigeria, Edo State. Emai is Egbuhari's first language. Ron came from Minnesota. So I met Schaefer much later after the 2002 meeting in the US when I was applying for a Fulbright program, and he was the director of international programs at SIUE and found my name and remembered me. And then he invited me to SIUE to work as a Fulbright FLTA where I was teaching Yoruba, and that was me and him and his wife. I was very young, I know. And so that was my first time in the US.
Oh, we can't see.
You can't see, okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's a perfect angle.
At the time, I had no idea what I was going to do with my language linguistics degree. I had a first degree in linguistics. And it was during the Fulbright program, being out of Nigeria, the opportunities I saw in the language in the field was one of the things that interested me in furthering my work in linguistics. So I came back for a master's program at SIUE. He was my project supervisor. In 2012, I wrote my master's thesis, a 300-page work titled "Studies of Initial Tonal Acquisition by American English Learners Learning Yoruba." American speakers, English speakers learning Yoruba. I wanted to find out what kind of mistakes American students would make if they were learning a tone language like Yoruba. And I had a team, I had 40 subjects, some who had no experience with any second language, some who had learned some second language that was non-tonal, like French, German, Spanish. Some who had only experience with a tonal language that was not English, like Mandarin. And then people who had learned some Yoruba in SIUE. And I give them a test and try to find out what kind of mistakes they made, who learned, who did better, and all of that. Quite interesting study. That's not why I mentioned him. I mentioned him because 2 weeks ago I sat with him for a Zoom meeting because I had started realizing many of my teachers were either retiring or were old, or some were dying. I wanted to speak with many of them and find out what got them into linguistics, what was the interesting thing, what made them who they were, what made them interested in learning languages as a subject. And it was something he mentioned that I found quite interesting. Many of these interviews, I will record them, transcribe, and put them online for people to read. He was born in 1949, like I said earlier. He's a descendant of German immigrants. His great-grandfather, great-grandfather, I can't remember now, had arrived in the US from Prussia. And he was given a farmland in Minnesota, like they did in those days for people over 21, through the Homestead Act. At home, he said, they spoke German as a first language. And I didn't know that about him. I knew he had German roots. He said on the farm, everybody spoke German, the neighbors spoke German, everybody spoke German, and that was their reality. And when they went out into the world, it was when they encountered English in school, etc. So I found that quite interesting because it was around the time when we had heard that English language was now the official language of the USA. And I was quite interested in hearing from him, who's an American, what that meant, and how does he see that compared to as a linguist. But then I found out that his own background even made it more interesting to hear what he had to say. And it was also interesting to me because as someone who comes from Nigeria, where English language as an official language, as a tool of colonialism, had such a detrimental effect on how Nigerian languages had developed or not in different ways. So his story was kind of interesting. I look back at my own, at the growth of Nigerian languages and how we were told not to speak any of Nigerian languages in school. Sometimes we're punished. There was, they called it vernacular if you spoke your own language in school. I went to Wales a couple of years ago and found that it was the same there as well, where they had Welsh knots. There was a board they hung on your neck in school if you spoke Welsh during the school hours. And whoever had the board on the neck at the end of the day had to be punished because they had broken the school. So I found that quite interesting. Nigeria has over 500 languages. This is wrong as well again. This is a Nigerian map. So many languages there. Yoruba, which I speak, is here. Igbo is in southeast. There's several other smaller languages in between. Some are bigger than others. Hausa is here. Hausa spreads all over West Africa. It goes out of Nigeria to Benin and goes on to Niger, etc. Igbo is located here. Yoruba also extended a little bit into Benin Republic. And then through the Middle Passage, it also came to the New World, through Cuba and Brazil, etc. So English language was imposed as a tool of governance and of the courts, of exams, of education, mostly of instruction and general communication. So native languages, over time, deteriorated into little spaces where nobody would use them publicly because they were either afraid of the repercussion in school, or sometimes ethnic tensions between other bigger cultures around you, or just being able to communicate with other people. English language became that language. And that role of English, while positive in some way in helping people understand each other, also then became such a burden where many languages started falling out of use over the years. Some languages have been luckier than others. Like I said, Hausa is one of the strongest spoken languages in Nigeria because many people use them as first languages. Yoruba has also been luckier than most because before, even during colonial times, many people still use the language, used it in newspapers, used it for education, used it in many other ways by elected officials. Yoruba is spoken by about 50 million speakers. Hausa is spoken by about 70 million or so, Igbo about 50 million. Those are the three major languages in Nigeria, but like I said, there are several more. But over the years, colonization, I mentioned earlier, then globalization, technological age and then the AI, there have been new developments that left African languages behind. Let me give you a few specifics. So Yoruba is a tone language, for instance. Most Nigerian languages are tone language, but Yoruba is mostly tone language. Many of you who are linguists here already know what a tone language is, but I'll give you a few examples. This is a Yoruba newspaper in 1922, so there were people who used it in those days for communication. Tone examples of Yoruba tone: or hand, or respect, or broom. For people who don't speak Yoruba, I probably have said the same thing 3 times. But those who do, they can tell the difference. This was what I was investigating in my thesis, by the way. Owo, money. Owo, industry. Owo, boil. The difference between the ones up here and the ones down here are the vowel quality signs on there, which tells you the difference between O and O. And then the tone on top, which tells you the difference between mid-tone, high tone, low tone, mid-tone, low tone, etc. So if you don't write the word properly, you would say something different depending on context. If you know the context of the expression, you might already understand what the person is writing or trying to write. If you don't, you might get confused. These are easy examples. These are confusion between the hand and respect, maybe not too problematic. In some examples, it might be. The farm is spelled the same way as the penis. See what I mean? Ile, ile, oko, etc. So Yoruba language created a problem for many people who try to write in it, in that if you don't, if the context is not clear, you might be saying something you don't intend to say. And so this has affected a number of, over the years, affected the use of Yoruba in public, but also in publishing, which is critically where the problem starts. So let's go back to that newspaper I showed you earlier, Eko Akete. Usually if you are writing this properly, Eko would have marks on top, Akete will have one as well. Iweroyi, they try to at least put the subdots also set, but nothing on the top. Because many of the print devices they had then could barely even do what they had there. See how far the O is from the diacritic on there. It should usually be touching. So these and many problems affected the Yoruba language and many other languages that, you know, that were being used in the country at the time. So people just decided to just use English as a way to write. This is an example of Grammarly today, which would underline things he finds grammatically or stylistically problematic. But by the time I was doing my undergrad project in 2005, the things that would be underlined would be names, Yoruba names, or anything that's not in English. So Francis Egbuhare would have been the one that would be underlined. And so when I was doing my undergraduate project, I decided that there was a problem in technology in a way it affected African languages. And again, this comes from, like I said, the technological problems of the past, but the internet then came and many of the problems that already existed just, you know, joined and became even more severe. And so I decided to create a dictionary of Yoruba names as a final year project, supervised by my Professor Egbuhare. And one of the things I wanted to do then that I thought would be important would be creating a dictionary where, I mean, at least the long-term goal would be to make sure that there is a record of Nigerian names, or Yoruba names I was starting with, such that if any computer system or product or software was made in the future, it already understands when you're using it in a Nigerian environment, this is a Nigerian name, I don't need to underline it. And so that was what I did. The project was 1,000 names in a CD. I pronounced, did the pronunciation, found the meanings, and submitted as an undergraduate project. This was 2005. Of course, I couldn't effect any of these things I had in mind, but I just thought that it was a direction of the future. If the data was there, maybe one day somebody would be able to do something interesting. Eventually, 10 years later, I turned it into a website where you can see now called yorubaname.com. Last week or so, we got to a 10,000th entry. It was the same project I started as an undergrad. It was just online now, accessible anywhere in the world, for any Yoruba person to add their name, to improve the meaning of the names that exist, to find the morphological breakdown of names. So you could, if you go to the dictionary, any name you click, you could find the, you could break it down into different morphemes and see the roots and how each name forms from the component parts. It also has an audio element where you click on the name, you can hear the pronunciation. To do that, I had to break Yoruba down into, Yoruba is it's a language that works with tone, but also each tone level is at the syllable level. So Kola, for instance, has 2 syllables. The name also has 2 tones. If your name is Abosede, 4 syllables. There are 4 tones on your name. So I sat down and then, the number of phonological processes that happen within Yoruba tonal system. When a high tone comes before a mid tone, the high tone is lower. When the high tone comes after a low tone, the low tone pulls the high tone down a little bit. Many linguists already understand how this works, assimilation, etc. I put all these rules down and got someone to put them into code. And it became what we call Yoruba text-to-speech, ttsyoruba.com, where now, if you go there, you can put any name, any Yoruba name or any Yoruba word, expressions. It struggles a little bit with phrases because it's what we call concatenated form, which is, it deals with them by syllable, so it's not always very smooth. But you can hear the correct pronunciation of a word if you put the tone marking correctly. And the tone marking is also very important, like I said earlier, because without it, the ambiguity in names can be problematic. So designing this then helped me to make sure the Yoruba name dictionary had a sound, so people could pronounce anything they found there. So that was 2015, and since then we've been doing a number of other, projects like that. Again, as a kind of personal intervention in this space where we assumed technology was speeding ahead and was leaving many African languages behind. I couldn't deal with every African language, but I had Yoruba, which I spoke competently, and I had people who were interested in helping to improve it. And then later that, 2015, I got a job at Google. They were looking for someone to lead a team to create the Nigerian English voice, like Buster did mention. Nigerian English maps at the time, the maps in Nigeria at the time were, the options you had were American English or British English. And these were maps that couldn't pronounce Nigerian street names. So they needed they wanted to create a voice that would pronounce Nigerian street names in a Nigerian English accent. And then the project was eventually launched in 2019, which was when the article was written. Igbo names, this was launched just a few days ago, but we've been working on it for a long time. Again, the same process as Yoruba name. I had a couple of lexicographers who were working behind the scenes to make sure the names are correctly vetted before they come to the public. So yes, those were all the projects we've been doing since 2025. Again, because AI then came, because it started from technology, just the internet became a problem, and then language translation between one language and the other, problematic. And then now we have AI, which is, again, leaving many African languages behind. So these were some of the work that I've been doing. Okay. I saw an interview a few weeks ago. It was between President Zelensky and Lex Friedman, I think this one. And the two of them spoke English and Russian and Ukrainian. I think both of them had lived in many of these countries before, so they could speak those languages. But the interview I was seeing was totally in English. I watched the whole thing in English, in their own voices. And I didn't know when they were switching between language and the other. The only reason I knew that it was done in 3 languages was because at the introduction he explained that at some point in the interview they switched between languages. And the reason why I could watch it in English and somebody else can watch it in Russian the whole interview, or in Ukrainian, was because we have advanced to a point where computers can understand what has been said, use the data to translate when necessary to the language of the person listening, and then also synthesize their voices so that you can see the mouth move exactly as in the language you're hearing it, even though that's not the language they're speaking. Quite an impressive achievement. 2005, when I left university, this was not possible in any language at all. Unfortunately, it's still not possible in any African language today. You can't have an interview between two, about they and I speaking Yoruba and English, and have the person watching it see it only in English, without mouths moving in sync, or only in Yoruba, like this one where you can watch it in 3 languages. So these are some of the visions we've had, and the assumption that creating tools and especially data in many of these languages would help when people eventually come to create technological tools that can then benefit these languages. The reason why Ukrainian, Russian, and English were possible here is because those three languages are languages that have had years and years and years of data creation and people working in those spaces. You can have translation. If you go to Ukraine, you probably have translation of every classic novel you know in English. Probably already exists in Ukrainian. Somebody has done the work. There's probably a lot of Ukrainian speakers online using the language every day, so there's a lot of data to use. There's probably a lot of people speaking Russian and using Russian and writing Cyrillic, etc. online, and that exists. This doesn't exist in many African languages. Now, Africa has 2,000 languages. How do we even start to be able to get enough data to be able to create something like this in the future? These are questions I think about every day. And one of the conversations I had with Smart earlier is about how do we even know what each community of language users want? What is useful for them in every instance? How do we know when we are doing more harm than good? And when we spend all the time doing machine translation or data gathering, etc., does each language need exactly the same thing? And how do we make sure that we can serve each language community and then use the effort we're doing to benefit both the language themselves and the global language community in general? It is possible, I assume. When I worked at Google, it took almost a year to complete the Nigerian English voice, like I said earlier. But today, 11 labs, you can just clone a voice in like 2 minutes. Record a sample of a voice, you can replicate it in different accents and different moods. Again, it's possible in English because English has extensive data all around the place. Everywhere you go, new words, expressions are being generated. So when people want to create stuff like that, they have something to use. African languages don't have that. So literature is one way in which I've thought about expanding this space and improving data and creating a corpus that can be usable in the future for a possible technological tool like this. And I've spoken in many places and advocated for Nigerian writers to, translate works into their languages or have others who do translation, speak to their publishers or encourage translation into African languages of their work. Many African writers today, from Shoyinka to Achebe to Chimamanda Adichie to Tejuko, write in English, and we know them as English. They call them African writers, but they're really African writers in English. And many of their works exist in many translations, German, French, Ukrainian, etc., but not in their own languages at home. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is one notorious example where it's been published and translated into almost 100 languages. It doesn't exist in Igbo, which is a language from which the story was conceived. And so I've been, being an advocate of that. I've also been an advocate of people writing writing properly in the language when you find words and expression of many of these languages in the English text, which sometimes happens. You're writing a short story, the character says a word in the language, and you want to put that expression as it exists in that language in the text. While maybe sometimes you translate it later or not, you expect people to get it in context. Many African writers I've seen would write those expressions without the diacritics, without the orthography. And I've begun to notice it among many of my contemporary writers, and I called it out a number of times. Those were ways I thought would be ways to push back and help, create a record, a trace, eventually that can help people in the future who may want to do interesting things. There have been a lot of other efforts. Jalada Translation did a translation anthology where they took one short story by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, translated into about 100 languages in Africa. This was one effort that is happening. A number of other efforts happening like that. Masakane is another effort where it's a grassroots organization where scholars from all over the continent come together and do research in different aspects of language documentation. And hopefully our synergy would help the language grow in the future. This is my book, by way my second translation. It's a collection of poetry by American professor Emily R. Grosholtz, who teaches in Pennsylvania. who was looking for an African language to translate the book to, and I came and I did the translation of this collection of poetry. I've also done a number of short story translations, including Chimamanda Adichie, Shoyinka, Haruki Murakami. His the first African language into which a story was translated was mine. This book called Confessions of a Shinagawa Monkey. It's a short story. That's that. We did a multilingual anthology a couple of years ago as well, where we found short stories by Nigerian writers, found other Nigerian translators to translate them, and have other people read them out loud. And again, building a corpus, one language at a time, and hoping that this encourages other people to do so in their own ways. I'm currently the Africa editor of Best Literary Translations. These are translations of works from around the world into English that we select. So this doesn't quite fit into what I'm advocating, particularly now, but the interesting thing about Best Literary Translations is that it also, at least I assume, help, if people know that the place exists for translations into English, encourage people to write poetry, creative work, short stories in their own languages first, and have other people translate them so they can get into spaces like this. So imagine my consternation a couple of weeks ago when I went online and found Chigozie Obioma, who is a Nigerian writer of fiction, spouting a couple of arguments about what he called assassins ideology, assassins of African literature. That's what he said. He was making a big dig at the insistence of some of us that African writers write or tell their publishers to write African names properly when they write in their work. I'm going to show you some of those things he wrote, and I can tell you why I disagreed with it. So this is a tweet. I'm highlighting this part where he says, assassin ideology grows its branches out of a strange soil. Put a diacritic on your name and show that you're truly an African writer. Wear beads, speak about the ways in which you want to tell our stories, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. You've made a grievous mistake for a writer. Can, but does not have to define themselves, not by their work. This is true of some greatest writers today, blah, 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 blah. Of course, he mentioned Salman Rushdie, who, of course, we know him as an Indian writer, even though he writes in English. So let's give Obioma a benefit of the doubt for a little bit. And I told him on Twitter, he didn't respond to me, that he was writing nonsense. Because I believe that the reason why we insist that people write diacritics on words is not just because we think, oh, you're projecting identity or you're trying to show that you're better than others. It's for a different reason, and which Twitter doesn't always give you the chance to be able to express in so detail. So we let that go. And then he continued. He said, I hold the belief that the when and who are inferior artistic questions when you're writing novels, because they don't reach the soul. There's something superficial about them, he says. They engage our eyes, etc., etc. But the why is the most important question a writer has to ask, which is, why would a man be so driven by a public view of himself as to be the one who murders his adopted son, like in Things Fall Apart? Or why would a man so want to inflict vengeance on a whale who spends his entire life chasing it in Moby Dick, etc., etc.? So far, so good, right? And then it says, for whom is a question that many African writers now ask, and that's a problem. He says what the assassin ideology has done is to invent a new question, a new dangerous question that must govern a novel. For whom? He says it's an assassin ideology, the African writer needs to be authentically African, etc. He went on and on and on. I don't want to repeat everything. I won't quote him again. But what got me really upset with this part of it is that he refuses to see the bigger picture of why many people insist, many of us who happen to be writers and linguists as well, that people should pay attention into how they portray African writing and stick to orthographies and help us because they occupy an important space to help bring African writing and literature into the future. He says for whom is a problem because we're focusing on the wrong things. Rather than the story itself, we are looking outside. And the answer I came up with is the fact that for whom, that particular question, there are those for whom that for whom question has already been answered. And that is why many of them don't bother with these things, because it compares African writers to writers from around the world. But there are people who write from the United States, for instance, who don't have to worry about the language of the audience they are writing for, because they know they are likely in English. If they're writing in Spanish, the audience exists, or German or French. They already have in mind what type of mindset the reader has, what language they speak, etc. But for the African writer, it's not always the same. It's not always an easy question. There are some people, of course, for whom the question has been answered. Like I said, there are people who speak Yoruba, only Yoruba. They don't need to worry about. They're going to seek Yoruba scripture, they're going to seek Yoruba music, they're going to seek, just Yoruba input. Of course, they're dwindling in number, the same with many African language communities. But the reason why the conversation happened in the 1962 conference on Makerere was because the writers there were struggling with the transition between what they had known to be fundamental structure of their knowledge consumption and they were bringing, and the new world they were entering and ushering in at the same time. They had come from a community that taught them in their own native languages. Shoyinka said he didn't speak a word of English until he was 8 or thereabout when he went to school. Chinua Achebe also was raised in Igbo. And they were now in this community where they were now the forefathers of African writing, and they had to write in English. So, of course, they were dealing with the questions of what is an African literature, and should we write in our own language, and if we don't, what exactly are we losing? They still had that to deal with. Ngugi wa Thiong'o was one of them as well. But today, Nigerian English is a Nigerian language. We consider it a Nigerian language. So there are some people for whom that's the first language, and they don't have to worry anymore. There are also some people, like I said earlier, who speak in their own mother tongue, etc. Google already exists in Nigeria, has a Nigerian English voice that I told you about that I helped create. Let me see if I can play this from the project was launched in Lagos in 2019.
So let's listen to an example.
Head north on Amadu Bello Way towards Adeola Street and then turn right on Adeola Odeku Street.
Okay, people seem to be very excited.
So let's listen to an example.
Okay, but there are, the Nigerian singers today like Ashake, who speak in Yoruba, who sing to a Yoruba audience. They don't have to worry about what the audience of their work is. And there are people like Flavor who speak in Igbo and who sing in Igbo. Oxford University has Nigerian English voice, Nigerian English, they add Nigerian English words to their lexicon every year. And Nigeria English continues to be a valid course of study. We have Pidgin, we have Afrobeats, and those continue to exist. But there are many of us who still have native competence in the language, or who still care about how Yoruba language or any other African language survives in the world. And there are many people who are competent in both languages and are worried about what happens to their language in the end. And for them, they continue to seek an opportunity for those two languages they speak and in which they inhabit to continue to be valid and useful tools to be able to use everywhere on the internet. And that's why Obioma, I believe, is wrong, because the for whom question has already been answered for so many people, but some of us, it still exists. Okay, I go back to Ronald Schaefer. Emai, the language he worked on for many years, is one of the most resourced, documented languages in Nigeria today. And that's the result of the work he's done over the years, coming to Nigeria every year. He and Professor Egbohari. And it will continue to benefit the culture and the language and the people who use it over the years. There are some languages in Nigeria today which are bigger than Emai, but who don't have that advantage because they haven't had people like him go ahead and study and do work and document and speak with people and collect stories in those languages. One shouldn't be able to speak English alone to be able to access technology, I believe. I was speaking earlier about the accessibility function on our phones where a blind person can use a phone because there are ways you can do it without needing to see what is there. But accessibility options exist only in English. So there are people in Nigeria who don't speak English. So how do they use accessibility options, for instance? And there are people in many communities like that around the place. With data and research and a corpus that has been built over the years, if people decide that technology can help those people, then we have materials to be able to use. Thanks to people like Egbohari and Schaefer, we have many of these. And so one day if MI becomes a language that's capable of working in technology, for instance, and it benefits the people in the area, people will be like, MI is a small language. There are bigger languages around it that don't have that same capability. Why? Because people have done the work, people have invested time and effort into creating data and collecting relevant stories that can be used. I submit that the assassins of literature, to use Obiama's expression, or of culture, of anything good, are the ones who insist that we must all think and behave alike and look and speak in just one way, in one language, believe in just one thing. In the end, it's not just in literature. They're probably the same people, who cause problems in, either in politics or in culture and in different other spaces. It doesn't always matter in what languages technology comes. It matters that technology is available to be able to, for us to be able to use it in any language we want to, and be able to empower people. Because technology is just a blank canvas, it's just a tool. We can make it serve us by tailoring them to the languages you speak, so that we can use it. Maya survived, like I said, because of this particular two men. One of them spoke German as a young boy in a country of overwhelming English speakers. The other one spoke Maya as a first language and now teaches, in a university and speaks English, and his children probably don't speak a word of Maya. So there's an irony in that. And in the case of German, probably not, it's no longer a language spoken, a common home language in the US today, but it may not be a problem because a homeland exists across the ocean where a thriving literary artistic culture exists for German. But it may not be the same for many other languages like Zulu, like Ojibwe, Lakota, Yoruba, Fulani, Zulu, and the rest of them. What do we lose in the quest for homogeneity, in the fear of color, of difference, of, what's the abominable word again, diversity? So what my conversation with Schaefer illustrated to me is that in the end, something I've been worried about my own continent, the way English language and the fear of exploring different language options has damaged the growing of local languages, has come to America, which is such a sad thing. But what does this mean? What does the future hold? My work as a linguist is to make sure that every opportunity I have, I continue to do the work I do to make sure that Yoruba, for instance, is competent and can be used in technology, but not to lose too much of it enough on the assumption that technology will save the language itself. It's always the people that need to save the language, not technology itself. But this is a dictionary of MI, again published by Professor Bohare and Schaefer. Before I go, just want to illustrate some of the things I've spoken about with this particular tweet I found a couple of days ago, where Mr. Macaroni, a Nigerian entertainer and activist, was replying to someone in Yoruba without tone marking, in as angry as he could have put it, and someone asked Grok, which is an AI tool, to try to interpret it, and Grok tried his best as much as he could. I was quite impressed actually that I got much of it right, even though the word was not tone marked, until I got to this part where it says, "You may eat now, but wherever you eat, my creator will punish you," which was not what the man said. The man did say that my creator will punish you. Yes, he did say that, but what he said here was not only imaginisi, was what he said, which meant that my prayers to you or my curses or whatever to you may not happen right now, but it will happen eventually. And the difference is the je, which is the difference between something being effective and something being eaten. Maybe there is a benefit in the fact that AI doesn't quite always understand everything we say. We can just get away with a number of things. Or maybe not. So these are the conversations we'll have eventually. I try to adapt this famous quote, "No man is an island himself." No language is an island either. Every language is a piece of a continent, every part of a me. Any language that diminishes me because I'm involved, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls for you. Thank you very much. I shall take your questions.
Okay, so now we transition to the conversation between Kola and Smara. I'll invite you to both. Maybe come to this side. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yes, thank you. And so we'll give maybe 10, 15 minutes for this conversation, and then we'll open up for Q&A from the audience.
Sure. Yeah. So I had some ideas what I'm going to say, but I'm going to completely switch to something else, exactly based on your point. So it's completely taking from the context. And I just want to say, I'm very, very excited to have you here. And this idea of multilingual language technologies, language diversity is very dear to my heart. I was teaching a class on that, and I have some of the students who already attended and graduated already. Some of them are still PhD students. So it's a topic I really care about. So I'm piggybacking on something that you mentioned, and is this dichotomy of the data, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to empower, let's say, communities to use technologies, you want to contribute data, we want the models and the NLP technologies to use this data. We create corpora to use that. But then on the other side, there is a community for which the data is actually, they mention it's their
resource.
Culture, mm-hmm. It's their knowledge, and it's something very sacred to them, and they don't want to share the data with the technology. So I think I find this as a conflict. So how do you see that, and how would we go about trying to get this? Because you mentioned stories, right? People tell oral stories, and they will be extremely useful for developing technologies, let's say, to understand the language, or maybe document and do that and revitalize it.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a tension I see.
Yes.
And what's your view on this and solution, if there is one?
Yes, I found it quite interesting, and it's a subject that field linguists deal with all the time. Question of how do you deal with someone who doesn't want your help? If you think you're providing help, if they don't think it's helpful, then what do you do? I'm lucky that in Yoruba, for instance, the language I speak, people don't think that I'm exploiting the language by creating a dictionary, because it's useful for everyone. And it's not something that is commercial. It's available to anyone to use, and it benefits the language like that. There are people who go to communities and come with this patronizing attitude of, we're coming to save you, and we are going to create something for you that will benefit you. And in most cases, they're not. They're probably exploiting it for themselves, like big tech companies swoop in. And even if they don't come physically to the community, they can go online now. Because I keep saying, I encourage people to use their language online, but the more you do that, the more you are also benefiting these tech bros whose whole life is about enriching themselves on the basis of our data without paying for it. So there is a push and a pull. How do we convince? I guess the question is not how do we convince people. Encourage people to be able to do the work themselves. I guess this would be the first way to look at it. The IgboName.com. Igbo is not my first language. I can play around with it, but it's not my expertise. I work with lexicographers who speak in the language, and they know that the purpose of the work is to help people who speak the language to be able to use it. And as soon as they see that that's not the case, they would not want their efforts to be going towards that process. So it's one of those things that one assumes that the nature and the universe figures out in the push and the pull what is the appropriate place to be.
Yes, because we are, for example, in the NLP community, and I think it's like in the academia and in other, we really care, and I think we want to build these technologies. And how would you, what would be the idea of building trust, right? So I think reaching out to the community. So I think we need to do maybe a bit more than just developing the technology and engaging the community. And where is the role of the community, where you are like an activist or a linguist trying to bridge this?
I always recommend that people use linguists. You work with linguists. One of the things I found with big tech companies is that they want to just send engineers and assume that you can gather data and just aggregate algorithms and stuff. There are linguists who live in those communities. There are people who speak those languages as first languages. There are people you can work with who benefit from the process of doing the work, who also then benefit the language as well. So that is one way to build trust. And universities, I think, have an advantage that the big tech companies don't have, because we know that universities are not using it for profit making, and they are just contributing. And for an archive that Ron Schaefer has built over the years with Egbohari, I asked him in the conversation that where is the data now? Do we make them available? And he said they are working on, of course they have been annotating them over the years and sometimes translating some of them, that they're going to make them available in university libraries or whatever. So those things, I think, show trust. And when other language communities see what has become of those who joined and cooperated with that kind of work, they might also want to do the same as well. It's always, I just go with linguists, work with linguists. It's always very helpful.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm very happy to hear this, and I'm hoping your message gets actually to the NLP community.
Linguists are very important, please.
I have one, another question a bit later, but let me go now, in looking in the positive outlook of the NLP, kind of AI. Mm-hmm. What do you think kind of the main opportunities that this technology will help for, both low resource languages where we don't have enough data online, or even endangered languages where there is the risk of actually losing the language, so we care about the documentation side of things?
Yeah, I'm a writer as well, so I like the idea of technology helping us to preserve a resource, a very important resource. So if Egbohari's work, for instance, or Schaefer's work, if they make them available and a university can create a language model out of it, who knows what kind of knowledge we can gain from elders from the MI community who spent decades telling stories and giving this into a recorded device. I find that quite interesting. People who want to go back into the past and each language is an embodiment of culture, of a way of thinking. I think that would be very helpful. And of course, like you said earlier, each community has different needs. There might be communities where people realize that many of their children don't speak the language anymore, don't have interest, and they can create funky tech tools that they might find interesting and make available to them and help them maybe learn the language either in school or at home or something as a way of revitalizing. Technology can come in and help in those kind of ways. So there are very many ways, I think, where technology can be of help. Yeah.
I have now provocative questions, because you are a writer and you are a translator of poetry.
Yes.
So a lot of work, including the NLP group of African languages, a lot of people use machine translation as that's the technology that is very advanced. So how do you see machine translation technology, especially in the realm of maybe narrative or poetry? Would you ever use it, or how would you use it, if ever? And what needs to get the technology to a place where it might be useful, or should it ever be used?
Well, yes, we do need data. Google Translate for so long, even till now, I don't think it works well with Yoruba or many African languages. As a translator myself, who has got paid for translating work, I would be rooting for the technology to never be good enough. But as someone who is also interested in technology and what it can do, I would do all I can to make sure it improves. But in the end, as a human being, as a writer, my job is not to depend on technology alone to make stuff. Because anything you depend solely on technology to do has taken the work out of your hands. You're not doing anything interesting. There will always be a human element that's very important and very relevant. And I hope that continues, even when technology gets better, even as much as it can ever get. But I do hope that the work we create, either in translation or in corpus creation in different ways, help improve many of these translation engines so they could work. They don't work very well with African languages for now, which is, again, a good thing or bad thing, depending on who is asking. Because I heard earlier, one of our colleagues was saying that some translation businesses laid off people because computers could do what human beings could do. I don't think that's good, but sometimes that always the inevitable end of competence in computer translation. But if I'm somebody giving job to a translation company and they keep using machines to translate it, eventually you would find out that it's not a human doing it, because there's a limit to how creative a machine can be. but people still want to save money and make as much for themselves. So that will always be the human problem. It's always going to happen. My job is to do what I can for language. But as a linguist, as a translator, as a writer, I will always depend on human creativity, which can improve technology, and technology can also improve human creativity. That balance is necessary at all times.
Yeah, and I think some of the work we have been doing, it was that it can maybe keep some of the semantic, but the pragmatic effect is lost. And I think that's where actually it's a lot of issue that still exists.
Yeah.
So I think that we have a lot of people here in the room, and I would want to kind of open up for questions.
So everyone, you're welcome to the table, and this is a free for all here at the Institute for African Studies. Please just briefly introduce yourself, like your name, so we know who's in the room, and then just ask the question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Puhin. I'm an incoming assistant professor at Stonebrook. I was Mara's PhD student here at Columbia for so many years, and I was very excited about your talk because I love Adichie's work. I think she's one of my favorite Nigerian authors. One of the things that it's very interesting, right? Because even though for translation we have the source material, a lot of the things that I've been thinking these days about the style and the voice, right? Say Adichie's voice is sort of, she uses a lot of very interesting metaphors, and there is like a very powerful tone about feminism, whereas you talked about Murakami and the Confessions of Shinagawa Monkey, which is more about like a little bit more surrealistic. So, do you think it's even possible to instill that sort of thing into a machine? Because based on my experience with AI, I think the style is so robotic. It's like you can immediately say the voice is very robotic. So, and for very good famous writers, I think they just stick to one translator. Like Han Kang's translator has been the same over all her books. So maybe there's a reason for that. So like, is it even possible for AI to translate literature?
I don't know. Again, it comes back to what we said. The AI you're talking about is the AI that has been trained on bad text. If we have more human translations, and in the future a new AI is trained on those, then there will be different outcomes in the end. So perhaps the good thing is that we'll always need translators, which is good for me as well. We'll always have jobs to work with. It's interesting, but as I was saying earlier, the reason why it's good to have a lot of literary text to train AIs and models on, I think, benefits not just literature itself, but even also technology they use every day as well. Because if the model finds out that it can express itself in different ways, not just in one robotic way of, this becomes that, and that there are different ways of expressing the same thing. Literature gives us that. In normal everyday text, you translate the Bible, Jesus wept. Jesus wept, that's what it is. But there are many poetic expressions that, in the process of just humanly translating them, and of course, if you're going to train a model to be able to do literary translation, you probably also want to give it different translators doing translations of exactly one text. That way, it can see that different people can interpret different, the same material in different ways. And that also probably benefits the AI itself. But again, my aim is not to make AI the most important translator, but that it exists and that the materials that it uses, even for other things, not just translation, is also creative enough and robust enough to be able to empower people who need them for different other things. Thank you. Yes, please.
So I'm Arkady. I'm a SMART's PhD student in my third year. So I worked on translation and literary text understanding of them. So thank you for the talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I was thinking about I'm a historian, and we're always looking for primary sources, right? And African history scholars, so we're always looking for primary sources. In the search for primary sources, there is a lot of, I suppose, prioritization of African primary sources for writing African history,
Mm-hmm.
but in the broader discipline of history, there's a prioritization of the textual archive
Mm-hmm.
for writing history. So there's a bit of a tension between one's practice as a historian and one's practice as an African historian,
Mm-hmm.
right? And listening to the talk, it struck me that so much of the technological development was text dependent,
Right.
right? And from my perspective as a historian, to rely solely on the text is to close off a tremendous
All right.
possible alternative archive, counter archive, other kinds of sources for history.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if it worked the same way with language, right? So for everything, I'm not even sure if I'm expressing myself, but conveying what I'm trying to say correctly. But does the textual dependence of the training somehow compromise
The outcome. I get what you're saying.
compromise the possibilities?
Yeah.
Not even just the outcome, but
Yeah.
the possibilities that are out there.
For sure, certainly. I assume that AI is trained on regular colloquial speech in Yoruba would perform better when walking the marketplace and you're hearing different people say different things. If you already have in the training data a number of people just speaking normally in an everyday life, there's a way we speak that is totally different when we write than when we write. And a very good point. I assume that people who create tools based on things written properly and methodically would have a robotic formal voice rather than ones that are trained on everyday. So I guess part of what we're doing also as linguists is to make sure we have as many of those variables as possible in the work we're creating, so that whatever outcome is also adaptable enough to fit in different spaces. So yeah, you want to add something?
Yeah,
to that?
I mean, I think there is some work, and Sarah, who is Julia's student, working on speech. So I think there is a lot of work kind of looking at both text and speech. So I think kind of processing the oral history, for example, rather than just the text.
Mhm.
And I think there is work on that as well. And it's a hard task. It's still a problem. It's still limited resources.
Yes.
But there is the AI technology where takes into account both the language and the text. Now trying to process videos as well, where you actually have the body language and everything,
Exactly.
and understanding those as well as being part of the communicative intent. So it's not as advanced. I would say it's more emphasis on the text side, but I think there is work on the speech and things in that as well. And, there is great work even in Colombia. That,
Mhm.
Yes.
Were you going to say something?
I was going to add that there are some very low resources language as well to build multi-module data. There's the ongoing effort in that, and there's also the effort to incorporate things like body language and policy models in order to understand language better. It's more challenging to do those aspects, which is more cultural specific compared to the language content itself. Then there are works on that aspect, it's just not as well to use as text-only models.
yeah.
And I just want to do a little follow-up before coming to you. Is just thinking about, from my experience as a historical researcher, that the textual library is also a very gendered one, which has to do with who has been trained in literacy.
Right. Yeah.
And so you may end up with a very gendered skewed outcome as well.
Mhm. Interesting. Yes, please.
Pam Davis, I am in the space of the mechanics of language. I'm an English speaker, but in recent trips to Ghana especially, I became very aware of the different mechanics of speaking an African language. In other words, the teeth, the tongue, the whistle that comes from the ears that are there. And you mentioned video, but what is the algorithm that allows that level of nuance, the mechanical nuance of language to kind of be clear, or is that available right now? Because with all the tones that you showed, there's a way, there's the way to diagram the differences. But when it comes to actually understanding and being able to project a pseudo speech in AI, is there a barrier, or as an English speaker, maybe the barriers in my mind? I also want to say that at this phase, like where we don't have to just like ask the speaker, like back
Yes,
and forth,
please.
but
Let's
it's
have
like an open
conversations, please.
conversation.
If anyone wants to respond, you can.
Yeah.
What I would say in response is that the work that people are doing to get the AI voices typically involves humans. In any case, there's the design, but there's also a human in the studio recording samples of voices before the computer then works on replicating or trying to understand the patterns and stuff. So whatever you bring to it as a human being to the studio typically also reflects in the outcome as well. So if you're a guttural speaker, the voice will likely be that same way. If you're soft speaker, it's the same thing. So that's totally different from language acquisition itself, which was what I was talking about earlier, about English speakers and how they acquire language. But if you want to train the computer to speak, just give it a couple of data and it would figure out how the system is and it can then replicate it. It's quite mysterious in some way, also quite interesting. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm so sorry first off for coming so late.
You're welcome. No
I
problem.
work in the International Student Services Office, and I was the point person for problems today. If you can imagine issues with students on basis when there are problems right now, there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's very nice to be here. I got a degree at TC in 2004 in international ed development. My thesis was on current practice at the time, 2002, in Gambian Mandinka writing in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked at IBM on an automatic translation from English to Mandinka engine, and also text to speech as well, Mandinka and Kola. And I'm just super excited just hearing these various questions, like the technology of 20 years ago.
Yes.
Putting diphones together, building
Yes.
these
They're way past that now.
Oh my goodness, it's
like
absolutely
obsolete.
astonishing. The things that are prosody.
Yes.
I mean, it's a big thing what you're talking about, right? Being
Yeah.
able to have the natural flow of language.
Yeah.
Super, super exciting.
It's crazy when you look back at how much leap we've made in just 20 years. It's crazy.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on just starting just now up. Is it BU, BC? There was the West African Language Center that was just started in fall 2020.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah.
That inspired a question from me.
Okay,
Go ahead.
you go if it's directly related to that.
Okay, so my question, we've been talking a lot about translation to and from English, which is written in a Latin script.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interested in other scripts.
Oh, yes.
So like African languages, they're written in Arabic script, maybe
Yes.
like Ajami script.
Yes.
How does that get incorporated into the
That's a good question. It's a good question. Something I've obsessed with also for a very long time. I just didn't put it there because we'll stay the whole day. Yoruba, much of the issues I have with Yoruba in technology, in print and in internet, etc., came from the decision to use the Latin script to write Yoruba. That's why we have the diacritic on top and under it. And many people complain that it's unwieldy, they find it hard to do and all that. But before the Latin scripts, which came in 1800s, Yoruba was written with the Arabic scripts, with what they call Ajami. And there's no records of them anymore. I don't think they were printed. They were just written scrolls and these things, ephemeral. And I've been thinking about wondering what it would be like to be able to write Nigerian languages in a new script. But number one, you first design the script to make them able to work across different Nigerian languages, which are so many of them. There are about 500 Nigerian languages. But third, most importantly, how do you get them into Unicode, which is the ones that regulate how scripts get into computer technology? Because even Yoruba, as it is now, it still suffers a lot from Unicode, which I didn't mention earlier, which I think is the really biggest challenge we have. Yoruba has it, a number of other African languages deal with it as well. When Unicode started, I think they allowed every language to be able to create different encoding. And for many of the early languages they used, like Turkish, etc., you could find expression as a sign that has both the diacritic on top or underneath attached together. I can't remember the word they used for it. It's composed together, so that just one strike of the keyboard, it gives you that expression on the computer. For Yoruba, even till now, you have to first write the vowel as a normal English language vowel and then add that one on top of it. So you're doing two keystrokes. And for some time on Twitter, even I think till today, if you're trying to write a Yoruba expression, every time you add a new keystroke, it reduces the number of texts you can put. It used to be 140 characters. So imagine trying to write something and you spend half of it just putting diacritics on top. So there's a lot of issues happening in technology itself. So several things we have to deal with to be able to get. So I always just assume that if we have a better script that is more, but again, there's the issue of also having to teach people how to write a new script that they don't have before. So maybe you should just deal with the one we have and just make Unicode more efficient and have people able to use it. Anyway, there are several questions that keep coming up that I think makes it.
That was the question at the African Writers Conference, that maybe we should just use this colonial language that we have.
Right.
And
Yeah.
infuse it with African expression.
Exactly.
So, so
it's an interesting
an
question.
ongoing debate.
Yes, indeed.
No problem. So Rebecca Wright, I'm a professor and chair of computer science at Barnard. So it's really interested because I think this is a tension that plays out in many places with your sort of discussion of the conflict or tension between kind of a human-first, human-centered approach and a technology-first, technology-centered approach, and even your own experience as a translator and someone who wants translation to be available widely, you embody that kind of tension. And so I guess to the extent that I have a well-formed question, it's sort of how to think about how we educate our computer science students, but I think the more general question is around, for example, you said 200 African languages, and so you've done this very detailed and painstaking work to, make advances with, Yoruba and names, and now expanding it out a little bit. If we wanted to use the advantage of scale that technology gives us to get, full representation and ability to work with in a culturally appropriate way for those languages and those communities, all of the different languages and other languages outside of Africa as well. Like, what's the best way to harness the technology, the best, sort of get the best part of the technology and the best part of the human related aspects.
Again, it depends on what the goal is. So if I had a university job, for instance, or I have a big grant, I would just scale the names project with a website that has all the languages in the country, in the continent, and just have each with a replicated, page, and people can just populate it and have volunteers, just like Wikipedia is, which is an open source project where people can use. Because that interests me. I'm interested in names. I'm always interested in knowing how names are formed and stuff like that. Do it for dictionaries as well. Many dictionaries don't exist in many of these languages. Sometimes you have translation dictionaries, mini lexicons. Sometimes projects people have done, but they're locked up behind paywalls and you can access it. So an open source type way where you can have, African languages in use on the internet can exist. I don't think we have something like that. Wikipedia has been people attack it for different reasons, but it's been a very big corpora that's right there, and you can use it for so many different things. And many of these big tech companies, when they need data, they go there and scrape everything that's there. Again, for good or ill. So if I had my way, that's what I would do. If I had money, unlimited funds, and people and friends to work with. But
I mean,
one of those things.
One of the things I would also argue, because all this, at least the current technology is very data hungry, right? So I need a lot of data to be able to build good model. But what about developing smarter algorithm where you can actually inject linguistic priors or some linguistic knowledge that exists?
Exactly.
Linguists actually build some grammars. Linguists know notion of morphology or anything.
Yeah.
Can we use that to build models, to make models better with smaller amount of data?
Right.
Which I think people have been working on that problem more rather than just saying, okay, I give all of this data and
Exactly.
no knowledge of the language, which is kind of very puzzling to me. Why even we would try to do that without exploiting some knowledge of linguistics that people know. So,
and I hope that AI also becomes usable or open enough that somebody can wake up in a community and say, we need this kind of tool. Okay, an AI exists. How can we adapt it using, again, the grammars we know already of the language and adapt to our use, rather than we have to give everything we have to you first before we get the technology, which is.
So we actually did some experiments before. I mean, it was like in a very, before the very large language model existed, so it's before that technology, still deep learning. But so basically we showed that if you inject linguistic knowledge and grammars, you can even learn from a small amount, which is the Bible,
Yeah.
just using the Bible data. I mean, of course, that's kind of what type of language is in the Bible. It's like, it's a different questions, but
Yeah.
like, let's say addressing some of the morphology or
Yeah.
part of speech. So I think I would argue more on the developing algorithm that kind of have some sort of knowledge bias, like from
Yeah.
linguistics.
Yeah. Anything that empowers linguists, I'm for it.
I have a quick question or just a thought from this conversation. You were saying that if, when Rebecca asked the question of how can we get representation of the 200 languages as opposed to just Yoruba and now Igbo? And you were basically describing like crowdsourcing. Right?
Yeah, of course.
And I'm thinking about the fact that systematically in the 19th century, there were all these dictionary projects or these translation projects focused again on the Bible, right, and across Africa. And I'm sitting here wondering if some of these translation projects captured in text a moment of languages that aren't actually even widely spoken anymore.
Yes, for sure.
And thinking about the difference of, building projects around these translated biblical texts versus around a crowdsourcing model. And, especially for languages that might not be as widely spoken at the level that would be required to translate something so metaphorical as a biblical, as a religious text. And yeah, I'm just wondering about where's the role of archival research?
Right.
In natural language processing that's going on today.
Yeah. That's where funding and resources happen. There should be. Certainly. Certainly. Some of the interesting names I found that were published in Yoruba name came from like an old newspaper. I'm just looking and I see a name and I don't know how it's pronounced because there's no marking on it, and I start asking people around, because this name
and
somebody bought the name. It's not used anymore. Yeah, so you don't know what it is. And maybe you ask someone and somebody sees a part of it that makes sense and they suggest, and then eventually you come, you figure it out. So those have happened. Or you develop a theory as well, on the basis of tone. The best thing we've done, I think, is the morphological breakdown we have in dictionary. I wish I could have shown you, where because we broke it down. So like I said, my name is Kola Wole, for instance. It's broken into 4 different morphemes, become Kola Wole. Ko, Ola, Wo, Ile. Ko means gather, Ola means honor, Wo means enter, Ile means house. So Kola Wole means he who brings honor into the house. And in the dictionary, you could see the name broken down into the different morphemes, and then the English translation. But when we are entering a new name, and it has any part of these morphemes in there, it already supplies it by itself. We stored it, all the work we've done in the past is already, before, for a long time, we had to, every time enter the same meaning. Sometimes the person working on it has already forgotten or doesn't know what something means. But now, computer, the memory of the thing is there. When you put, the name, somebody's name is Kolapo, okay. Ko, as soon as you put there, it populates the name already there. So there is some, and that can sometimes help you with a name you don't even know. Maybe like Wordle now, it gives you 3 of the options, and okay, this last one has to be this one. And then, so if we can work with archives, sometimes it helps us find new things we don't know. But like you said, there are many publications that exist. Sometimes names, even the spellings are different now, because the orthography in 1860 is not the same we have now. Things have changed. And we sometimes discover new things in there. Sometimes people, private records, somebody called me a Pinheiro, not Pinheiro, I remember some guy from, had family in Brazil, but had lived in Nigeria, Marino. And then he said in their family history, they have this record of these interesting names that they don't know whether they are Yoruba names. And she scanned them and sent them to me. And I could look through them and find ones that are interesting, the ones that work, the ones that are not. And some of them I put there, even if I don't know the meanings, I say, verification needed, and hopefully somebody someday sees it and is able to help supply. So yes, there's a connection we have with the historians and people who do archiving, and there's so much more we can learn from even what has gone in the past than just from today. But the fact that people exist today who can then go online anywhere in the world and just scroll through gives us the benefit that we don't have from field workers who just used to go to villages and sit in one or two corners. Now everybody has access to the internet, so we might as well use it for the benefit of data collection and annotation. Thank you. Good question.
Well, this has been such a rich conversation. Thank you so much, the two of you, for being
I
here.
don't know if you have something.
Oh, was that?
Yeah,
Oh,
yes,
it's even one tiny question. Like,
Sorry.
you mentioned a lot about the role of good quality data, right? Like
Yes.
If you're going to include the translations, we need data. But I mean, given the current landscape of technology, I guess like writers or translators are extremely cautious and skeptic about sharing their data, because the moment they do it, all they do is like they train a language model on it, and the goal of their language model is not, I mean, even though the overarching emphasis is to empower and augment human and knowledge, but I think we know that the sort of harsh reality is to replace translators.
Right.
And I've talked to translators and they literally say that, I mean, no one wants to, even if it's bad, like AI translation, people don't want to use.
Yeah.
So then like for literary work, especially I think like why would a literary translator want to have so much effort unless there's like proper compensation structures?
Oh yeah. But again, I'm not on the side of big tech. And the reason I keep mentioning it is that I want more translators to do work in translation from English into African languages. Period. For its own use, for the benefit of readers in African languages, for the benefit of the writers who get new audiences in their own spaces, and for the benefit of creating a corpus that can be used for different things. So it's not my aim to use that to create a translation engine somewhere in the future. If somebody needs it somewhere, I hope they can have materials enough to be able to use. But my aim is literature itself. I think it's just something weird in that many Nigerian writers write only in English, and the works don't exist in their own languages. And the people who know them, who live around them, from whose lives many of these stories come, who can't read the work. And that in itself, I think, is something I'm trying to change before the data is not useful for any other purpose at all.
I mean, I think there's a higher conversation of having policies in place, right? And how the data then is used by the tech. So it's not that we shouldn't translate.
We can then put in
but then put in
guidelines
place,
to make sure.
Guidelines to like not use it.
Exactly.
Like without copyright on the translators.
Yeah, if more Nigerian writers employ translators to translate their work into Yoruba, I get paid. I'm a human being. I like that. I want that to happen. Then we can decide that we don't want the text to be mined unnecessarily, and that's fine too. It's fine for you.
I appreciate your question about not being naive about, the final destiny.
Yes.
I'm not going to say anything.
This has been nice.
Thank
you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
We were talking about sort of criticisms to authors for how they handle different words in different languages and like that. I had a talk about Juno Diaz, who writes he writes in Spanish and in English, but he wrote a book in English where he had plenty of Spanish words in there and he didn't have them translated.
Right.
And he got a lot of criticism for this, and he had a very principled reason that he felt it was appropriate.
You have to remain,
his way. The emotions were very high.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of writers like to argue, and I find those things interesting.
Yeah.
You can learn one or two things.
And I think he wasn't even saying like they'll definitely get it from context.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they will, maybe they
Maybe
won't.
they
and
won't,
that's
exactly. Many songs we listen to, we don't know everything they're saying.
Exactly.
If you can enjoy the beauty and you can get by at the moment, maybe that's enough. You know? Thank you.
Yes, I said it was.
And so as he's a student, I was just listening. Oh my
Again, I'm so sorry that I missed the beginning.
No, okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Sure. So you work for IBM?
I worked for IBM for a period of time, after my field research in the Gambia. I lived in the Gambia and Senegal for about 4 years. And then when I came back, I worked on automatic translation and transliteration also. Drove into Arabic script.
Is that just still doing language work?
Honestly, I'm not sure exactly what they're doing at this point. I mean, it's so, your iPhone can create a view as an engine. Your voice in English. Like 15 minutes or something. Can you imagine that you can probably do the same thing in any other 20 years later, all the So are you here?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I live in Minnesota. I'm invited from it is a job for me.
No, I work in the International Student Services Office. So.
Okay. Are you the director?
No. Okay. One of we work with 20,000 international students, so it's an office of 40 people. It's all so let's be good.
Give you my card. I need to reach out. Let's see if I have it here.
I don't know if you have a copy of your presentation.
I do have it.
Okay, I'll email it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Take care. All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you again.
But I forgot to mention that my books are here. It's all right. No, do you have them? Don't worry. Don't worry. You probably didn't bring them. Hey, thank you very much. Huh? It's okay. Don't worry.
Everyone was very much on edge.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you
And
very
keep in
much.
touch, and if you want to work on, we
Yes.
are all very happy to work on.
You have my email, please.
The class is in, unfortunately.
I'll be happy for any collaboration. No questions, man. I can tell you, I need to try it first.
What's your favorite Adichie book?
It's half of a yellow.
Okay.
What is yours?
I think Americana. I mean, that was the
Most people like Americana. We think Americana is
I read it at a point in my life where I was like, okay, this is amazing.
It's a nice book, but because we had that was a big subject in the whole year. The war, people were like, okay, give us more epics. And then he travels to America, is romance novel. Okay, whatever. I haven't read the new one. I bought it, but I
Yes,
haven't read
I saw it. It's like, and it was like awarded like the, I think the
Orange. I think she's nominated for the Women's Prize.
Yes. I mean, the Sunday Times did like a pretty good feature on her. I'm working on something on writing and style, and she's one of the authors.
And she was in New York yesterday.
Yes.
I missed it. Yeah, she came to give a talk. I missed
She's
it.
one of the most famous Nigerian authors.
Yeah, she came to read. I missed it because of
All her books are good.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
I am so bad. I know they did it right.
There's very little control.
maybe I'm the
I
most
think that
corrective voice
what I'm
saying
trying
that
to
we
lead
can't
more
win.
students
Can we
I mean,
win?
it's also
Maybe tomorrow
very
morning.
interesting
I
because
don't know,
someone like
like-
Luigi, who probably is giving a lot of voice to young Nigerian writers, right? I mean, there is also a huge amount of surge of Nigerian authors applying for MFA programs and like the-
No, she opened the
I
doors.
work
She opened doors for so many
Absolutely,
writers.
because I work with a lot of MFA students,
Okay.
and a lot of them are in like very prestigious places like Sir Brown or like Writers Workshop and like or NYU, and which are very competitive programs. And I think like
No, she's opened the door.
is one of the person who is sort of like near that culture.
Before she published Purple
Yeah,
Hibiscus,
you have a certain, like,
Nigerian writing had gone down. Even the English Shamika, who had won Nobel Prize,
but I'm just letting you know
Yes,
that,
yes.
that this
and
is
so
also, this is
the
all-
success of that book just opened doors to so many people publishing and writing.
I was there for a conference and I saw these signs.
Tell everybody you're a Nigerian writer, people want to read what you have to write. You know, everybody wants to
So
go
where
back
does
and
she
read
live
it.
from?
I'm sure that leadership is aware of that.
She's
I mean,
not
and
alone.
her writing is one of the things that makes me believe that maybe AI is not going to write anything because
No, yeah, I would not. I know that for sure.
deeply entrenched in culture.
Exactly. You can make.
How can AI write? Because AI doesn't have the personal experience. AI doesn't grow up in colonialism, so it's like
It's going to use whatever is given, which already defeats the purpose of creativity. Creativity is supposed to find something
Yes.
new and think about it differently.
I did my PhD at Columbia with Smart on creativity as well, and I'm starting a
I'm trying to come as often as
Okay.
possible.
Oh, you don't work it.
No, I do not. I'm finishing my postdoc this year, but I'm starting the faculty job in August.
Oh, that's
Yeah, and my research is also on like AI and writing and like creative labor.
Do you write creative writing?
I mean, nothing.
I actually have a collection of Kola's books if anybody wants to buy one, in my office, so just FYI. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, come with me.
I have to go now, but I think I'll
Thank you for
Congratulations on your job in bro.
Yeah, no, it's his last year he got it, yeah. But it was in a good time to actually get it.
Yes, now they call
Now
offers
it's
are
like crazy.
not even giving offers.
This is the Institute for African Studies. You're all welcome. This is our lounge.
Thank you very much for your help. Appreciate it. I hope I didn't keep you standing for too long. I hope I didn't keep you standing for too long. Okay.
It's a little bit cold for me. But yeah, these are the books. You know, Smart wants to support you.
I want some of the, like.
This is my poetry collection. Sorry. This is my poetry
Looking
collection.
forward to things to read, so that's
This is
exciting.
This is the. Oh, so this is the Yoruba English translation I spoke about.
My sister is like very interested in looking also in African.
So this is the
Oh,
poem.
the poem,
this
and this is
Yoruba.
okay,
I think I have enough on my phone. You can pay with your card if you have. Cash is fine too. Depends on where you want.
I'll do this.
Okay.
And let me see, like, is this,
That's poetry. Just
oh my god.
travel poetry.
Okay, awesome. I want this.
Okay.
I really, this and that, and then I know, like, my sister is like writing a lot of poetry, and she
Oh,
also
really?
is very interested in African
Oh, okay.
languages. and everything.
Lovely.
So for me and for her.
Okay.
Okay, so get this and this. Can I get this one?
Yeah.
Let's see this here.
That's travel writing by, not by me, but I wrote the preface to it. It's an African writer who used to live in the US and In the 60s, traveled around the world.
And this is like okay.
It's like a travel log. It's a travel writer. So every year we collect translations from around the world. Published by different.
Okay, so let me okay. You need to tell me because I don't see.
So which ones you want?
This
two. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe this one too.
Okay. Should you want me to sign it for you?
Yeah. Perfect.
Do I spell your name?
Smara.
Smara.
You can say S-M-A-R-A.
What's with the DAs?
Smaranda is the full name, but it's kind of people kind of stumble by the middle. They get there, they kind of like okay, forget it. So I say Smara is for short. I can live with that. It's good. At the library, that's what is it?
It's a Scotch.
And then if not, we'll do with the things. Like, let me tell me, like, yeah.
Okay. Barnard is 15. This is 20. And this is 15. So 15, 15, 30, 20. That's 50.
50, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Very
so
kind of
much.
you.
No, I'm very excited. Wow, I feel very special. I feel like an event where I got books from the I feel like this is awesome.
I hope you enjoy them. Let me know what you think.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, spring break is coming, so
Yes.
I have reading material.
That's right. So are you watching the film? The film that... Oh, did you say you have another event?
Yeah, I
Is it-
have another event. I have to go now, but I will.
Thank you very much.
But let's
I
keep in
really
touch. I
enjoyed
think,
this. We
yeah,
should.
I'm not, and then I think you should. I mean, if you're interested to keep like in NLP and everything,
Yes,
I
please.
think it would be great.
Anything
And then if you
interesting
have,
in
especially if you have like these
conference
stories and stuff that I think
Yes.
would be nice to
Yes, I'll be
work
happy.
in. And I hope we will be like I don't know. I'm gonna talk with Julia because I see now she's upset she doesn't get in. But I think like this kind of, especially with Sarah and so like she's interested in the school, so it would be
Yeah.
like a nice.
Yes, please. Interested in the Cuban version.
Very nice to meet you. Okay, yeah, that's much better.
All right. Bye-bye. I'm so tired.
Okay. Now, what happened to FN?
I think it's coming for the film.
Oh, okay.
That's what I think I could wrong.
Now, shall we walk over to the film?